Turns out the treasure was between the human's legs. Alien Mercenary has work to do. Kayla's silver-white hair cascaded over her shoulders as she leaned against the bar counter, nursing her drink. The dimly lit establishment buzzed with the usual crowd of mercenaries, smugglers, and various other individuals of questionable repute. Her smooth purple skin caught the ambient light in a way that made her stand out among the patrons, though she'd learned long ago how to blend in despite her striking appearance. "Another successful job, I hear," the bartender remarked, sliding a fresh drink her way. She offered a slight smile, her large blue eyes reflecting the neon lights overhead. "News travels fast. Always does when it involves the best retrieval specialist in the quadrant." Kayla took a sip, savoring the burn as the liquid slid down her throat. Her form-fitting gray top and comfortable pants accentuated her slender figure, a tool in her arsenal as much as the concealed blade strapped to her thigh. "I'm looking for Kayla Tenari," a voice spoke from behind her. She didn't turn immediately. Instead, she caught the reflection in the mirrored wall behind the bar. And a tall, thin alien with pale green skin and elongated features stood a respectful distance away. His expensive attire marked him as someone with credits to spare. "You found her," she finally said, swiveling on her stool to face him. The alien, a Viridian judging by his features, gave a slight bow. "My employer wishes to discuss a business opportunity. Privately." Kayla considered this for a moment, then downed the rest of her drink. "Lead the way." The Viridian guided her to a secluded booth at the back of the establishment. Seated there was an older alien of the same species, but with skin that had faded to a pastel mint. His fingers were adorned with various rings that probably cost more than what most mercenaries made in a year. "Ms. Tenari," he greeted, gesturing to the seat across from him. "I am Patron Elric. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." Kayla slid into the booth, maintaining a relaxed posture while keeping her senses alert. "Your assistant mentioned a business opportunity." "Indeed." Elric leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I require a specific biological component. It's called prime essence. Rare, valuable, and somewhat difficult to obtain." "I don't typically deal in biological," Kayla replied, her interest piqued despite her reservations. "They tend to come with complications." "The compensation will reflect those complications." Elric slid a data chip across the table. "Half now, half upon delivery." Kayla picked up the chip, inserting it into her wrist device. Her eyes widened slightly at the figure displayed, enough to buy her own ship, maybe even retire if she managed it well. "What's the catch?" she asked, knowing there always was one. Elric's thin lips curved into what passed for a smile among his kind. "The essence can only be harvested from human males, and they must be willing participants to an extent." "Humans?" Kayla raised an eyebrow. "They're not exactly common in this sector." "There's a human trade delegation arriving at Nexus Station tomorrow. Among them is a security officer named Max Harris, young, healthy, and, according to our intelligence, traveling alone." Kayla considered this. Humans were an enigma in the galactic community, relatively new to interstellar travel, but advancing quickly. She'd encountered a few in her travels, but never had much interaction with them. "And how exactly is this essence harvested?" she asked. Elric handed her another data chip. "All the technical details are here. The process is intimate, but not harmful if done correctly. One extraction should be sufficient for our needs." Kayla pocketed the chip. "I'll need specialized equipment. Already arranged. It will be delivered to your quarters this evening." She nodded, making her decision. "I'll take the job." "Excellent." Elric stood, adjusting his ornate robes. "My assistant will provide any additional information you require. We expect delivery within 3 standard cycles." After the Viridians departed, Kayla remained at the booth, contemplating the assignment. Humans were said to be unpredictable, emotional creatures, qualities that could make her job either easier or significantly more complicated. Back in her quarters, Kayla reviewed the information Elric had provided. The extraction device was simple enough to operate, but the details of the harvesting process made her pause. According to the data, prime essence was a reproductive fluid produced by human males, expelled during moments of physical pleasure. "Well," she murmured to herself with a slight smirk, "that's certainly a new approach. The next morning, Kayla boarded a transport to Nexus Station, dressed in attire that would help her blend with the station's cosmopolitan population, while still accentuating her natural assets. The equipment was discreetly packed in her carry case, along with various tools of her trade. As the transport docked, she mentally reviewed her plan. Locate the human, establish contact, create an opportunity for private interaction, and complete the extraction. Simple, straightforward, and with minimal risk. The kind of job she preferred. Nexus Station bustled with activity, its central promenade filled with beings from dozens of species. Kayla made her way to the diplomatic sector, where the human delegation would be staying. According to the intelligence Elric had provided, Max Harris would be off duty this evening and likely to visit one of the station's entertainment venues. She positioned herself at a lounge frequented by visiting officials and settled in to wait, ordering a drink that would last her through the evening. 3 hours later, her patience was rewarded when a group of humans entered, their distinctive appearance making them easy to identify among the diverse crowd. Now, one of them matched the image she'd been provided, tall with a broad chest, athletic build, and tousled blonde hair. Max Harris carried himself with the alert posture of a security professional, his eyes constantly scanning the room even as he laughed with his companions. Kayla watched as the group settled at a table, and noting how Max positioned himself with his back to the wall, facing the entrance. A professional indeed. This might require a more subtle approach than she'd initially planned. She waited until he separated from his group to approach the bar before making her move, timing her own trip to the bar to coincide with his. "First time on Nexus?" she asked, sliding up beside him with practiced ease. Max turned, his eyes widening slightly as they took in her exotic appearance. "That obvious, huh?" "You have that look of someone trying not to look too impressed," she replied with a smile. "It's charming." His lips curved into a grin that Kayla had to admit was rather appealing. "Well, I'd hate to disappoint a local. Should I be gawking more openly?" "Perhaps at the right attractions," she suggested, allowing a hint of flirtation to color her tone. And just like that, the trap was set. "So what brings a human security officer to this corner of the galaxy?" Kayla asked, leaning closer to Max as they shared drinks at a quieter table in the lounge. "Officially, I'm part of the delegation's security detail," Max replied, his eyes never straying far from hers. "Unofficially, I volunteered because I've never been to this sector before." "An adventurer," she observed with a smile. "I like that." 3 hours into their conversation, Kayla was surprised to find herself genuinely enjoying Max's company. Humans had a reputation for being straightforward compared to most species, and Max proved no exception. His stories about Earth and human customs were fascinating in their strangeness. "What about you?" he asked. "I don't think I've met anyone from your species before." "We're not common in diplomatic circles," she replied, offering a practiced half-truth. "I'm a cultural consultant. I help visitors navigate local customs." Max's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "And are you consulting officially right now, or is this off the clock?" "Definitely off the clock," she purred, touching his arm lightly. "Would you like to continue this conversation somewhere more private?" "My quarters aren't far." The slight dilation of his pupils told her everything she needed to know about his answer before he even spoke. "Lead the way," he said, his voice dropping to a lower register that sent an unexpected shiver through her. As they walked through the station's corridors, Kayla maintained casual conversation while mentally reviewing her plan. The extraction device was simple, a specialized collection vial that would preserve the essence in optimal condition. According to her briefing, human males typically responded well to physical stimulation, making the extraction process straightforward. Once inside her quarters, she offered Max a drink, one containing a mild sedative that would make him compliant without rendering him unconscious. The balance was crucial. The essence needed to be harvested during a state of arousal and pleasure. "Nice place," Max commented, accepting the drink and taking a sip. "Great view of the station's central hub." "One of the perks of my profession," she replied, moving closer to him. "I get to enjoy the best accommodations." Kayla initiated physical contact naturally, her fingers trailing along his arm as she guided him to sit on the edge of her bed. The sedative would take a few minutes to affect him, so she maintained conversation, asking about Earth and human customs. "So humans pair bond for life?" she asked, genuinely curious despite herself. Some do, Max replied, his eyes growing slightly unfocused as the sedative began to take effect. But it's more complicated than that. We're adaptable. Adaptable, she repeated, leaning in to brush her lips against his neck. I like adaptable. Max responded to her touch with enthusiasm, his hands finding her waist. Kayla allowed herself to enjoy the moment. It made the job easier when the mark was attractive, and Max certainly qualified. As his movements became less coordinated, she guided him back onto the bed, straddling him with practiced ease. Just relax, she whispered. Let me take care of everything. You're not like anyone I've met before, he murmured, his words slightly slurred. I'll take that as a compliment, she replied, reaching for the restraints she'd hidden beneath the pillows. With swift, practiced movements, she secured his wrist to the bedframe. Max blinked in confusion, the sedative preventing him from reacting quickly enough to stop her. What are you? He began, but she placed a finger against his lips. Shh, don't worry, this won't hurt, she assured him, securing his ankles next. In fact, you might even enjoy it. Once he was properly restrained, she placed a soft gag in his mouth. Sorry about this, she said, finding herself genuinely apologetic. It's just business. Max's eyes widened as understanding dawned through the haze of the sedative. He struggled against the restraints, but they held firm. Kayla retrieved the extraction device from her case, setting it up beside the bed. I need something from you, she explained, her tone professional now, a biological component unique to human males. The process of extraction is intimate, but I promise it won't cause lasting harm. She began the extraction process using her knowledge of xenobiology and the information provided in her briefing. To her surprise, despite his initial resistance, Max's body responded to her touch. The extraction device filled slowly with a pearlescent fluid, the prime essence she'd been contracted to obtain. When it was complete, she held up the vial, examining it with professional curiosity. I had no idea the treasure was between a human man's legs all this time, she remarked with a slight smile, meeting Max's eyes. Fascinating. What she hadn't expected was the wave of guilt that followed. Max's eyes held not just anger, but betrayal, and it affected her more than she'd anticipated. Kayla had performed countless extractions and acquisitions throughout her career, but something about this one felt different. She set the vial aside and sat on the edge of the bed. I should explain, she said, surprising herself with the admission. I was hired to collect this. It's apparently extremely valuable in certain scientific circles. Max made muffled sounds behind the gag, his expression demanding further explanation. I'm not going to hurt you, she continued. Once I deliver this sample, my contract is complete. I'll release you and you can return to your delegation. But as she spoke the words, Kayla realized she was experiencing an unfamiliar reluctance. Something about Max, his directness, his humor, the way his eyes had lit up when he talked about the stars, had gotten under her skin in a way no Mark ever had before. She reached out, hesitating just before touching his face. I'm sorry, she said softly. This isn't personal. But even as she said it, Kayla knew she was lying, to him and to herself. After several minutes of internal debate, Kayla reached for the gag in Max's mouth. His eyes followed her movements warily. If I remove this, will you shout for help? She asked. He shook his head, though the anger in his eyes remained undimmed. I'm choosing to trust you, she said, carefully removing the gag. Max worked his jaw for a moment before speaking. Trust? That's rich coming from someone who drugged and tied me up. Fair point, Kayla conceded, sitting on the edge of the bed. In my defense, it's just business. Your business is abducting people? My business is acquiring rare items for clients willing to pay premium rates, she corrected. The method varies depending on the item. Max tugged at his restraints. And what exactly did you take from me? Kayla held up the vial containing the pearlescent fluid. It's called prime essence. Apparently it's unique to human males and extremely valuable. You're telling me you kidnapped me for… Max's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You've got to be kidding me. I was surprised too, she admitted. The males of my species have a different anatomy. The extraction process is more complicated. Despite his situation, Max let out a short laugh. So you're basically a high-tech sperm thief? Kayla tilted her head, considering the crude but accurate description. I prefer specialized biological acquisition expert, but essentially, yes. And now what? You got what you wanted. She studied the vial thoughtfully. Actually, I'm not sure one sample will be sufficient. The client was vague about the quantity needed. This was a lie, of course. Elric had been clear that a single extraction would suffice. But something about Max, perhaps his directness or the way he maintained his dignity despite his compromised position, made her reluctant to conclude their interaction so quickly. So I'm supposed to be your prisoner until you decide you have enough? Max asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. Think of it as an extended cultural exchange, Kayla suggested, attempting levity. You said yourself you wanted to experience new things in this sector. Being tied up by a purple alien wasn't on my bucket list. Perhaps it should have been, she replied with a small smile. You might find the experience educational. Max's expression remained stony, but Kayla noticed the subtle shift in his breathing when she leaned closer. The human might be angry, but he wasn't immune to her proximity. Look, she said, adopting a more serious tone, I understand you're upset, but I meant what I said. I have no intention of harming you. Once I've completed my contract, you'll be free to go. And your contract requires multiple samples? Kayla nodded, maintaining the pretense. The client is conducting research on human biology. The more diverse the samples, the better. Max was silent for a long moment, studying her face. You're lying, he finally said, but I can't figure out why. His perceptiveness caught her off guard. Most marks were too disoriented or frightened to read her so accurately. What makes you think I'm lying? Security training includes basic interrogation techniques. Reading people is part of the job. His blue eyes held hers steadily. So what's the real reason you're keeping me here? Kayla found herself at an unusual loss for words. She'd never had difficulty maintaining her professional demeanor during a job, yet something about this human made her usual defenses falter. I'm not entirely sure, she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. Max's expression softened slightly at her unexpected candor. That makes two of us confused then. An awkward silence fell between them, broken only when Kayla stood and moved to a small console on the wall. Are you hungry? I can order food. You're offering dinner to your captive? I'm not a monster, she replied, slightly offended. Besides, maintaining your physical well-being ensures the quality of future samples. Max snorted. How considerate. Despite his sarcasm, he did provide his food preferences when asked. Kayla ordered meals for both of them, then returned to sit beside him. If I loosen your restraint so you can eat, will you try to escape? She asked. Probably, he admitted. She appreciated his honesty. Then I'll have to feed you myself. And when the food arrived, Kayla arranged herself beside Max on the bed, alternating between feeding him and taking bites of her own meal. The intimacy of the situation wasn't lost on either of them. This is the strangest date I've ever been on, Max commented after swallowing a bite. Is that what humans call this? A date? No, humans generally call this kidnapping, he replied dryly. But the dinner part is almost date-like, if you ignore the restraints. Kayla found herself laughing. You have an unusual sense of humor for a captive. Adaptation is a human specialty, he said. Besides, getting angry won't improve my situation. As they continued their meal, Kayla found herself sharing details about her life, her homeworld, her career as a mercenary, the various strange items she'd been hired to acquire over the years. Max, in turn, told her about Earth and his experiences as a security officer. By the time they finished eating, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. The tension remained, but it had transformed into something more complex, a mixture of wariness, curiosity, and an undeniable undercurrent of attraction. You know, Max said as Kayla cleared away the remnants of their meal, on Earth, there are legends about beautiful non-human women who seduce men and steal their essence. Really? She asked, genuinely intrigued. What are they called? Succubi, he replied. Though in the legends, they're usually after souls, not reproductive fluid. Kayla returned to the bed, sitting closer than strictly necessary. And is that what you think I am? A soul stealer? I haven't decided yet, Max answered, his eyes tracking her movements. But I'm starting to think there might be more to you than just a mercenary. The admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibilities neither had anticipated when the evening began. You know, Max said after a long moment of charged silence, if you're planning to keep me here for multiple extractions, we might need to establish some ground rules. Kayla raised an eyebrow. Ground rules? You're in no position to negotiate, human. On the contrary, he replied, a hint of confidence returning to his voice. If you wanted to just take what you needed by force, you wouldn't be feeding me dinner and making conversation. You want my cooperation? She studied him, impressed by his reasoning despite herself. And what would these ground rules entail? First, these restraints need to go, Max said, tugging at his bonds. I can't feel my fingers anymore. Kayla hesitated. How do I know you won't try to overpower me the moment you're free? You don't, he admitted, but I give you my word that I won't, and humans take their word seriously. So I've heard, she murmured, considering her options. The sedative had mostly worn off by now, and Max was clearly alert and strong. If he wanted to escape, restraining him would become increasingly difficult without resorting to measure she found herself reluctant to employ. Making her decision, Kayla reached for the restraint on his right wrist. If you try anything, I'll have you back in these faster than you can blink, she warned. Noted, Max replied, watching her intently as she released first one wrist, then the other. He sat up slowly, rubbing his wrist where the restraints had left faint marks. Kayla tensed, ready to defend herself if necessary, but Max made no aggressive moves. Instead, he simply stretched his arms above his head, his muscles flexing beneath his shirt in a way that drew her gaze. That's better, he sighed. Now, about those ankles? Kayla moved to release his ankles, maintaining a cautious distance. Once free, Max swung his legs over the side of the bed, but remained seated, seemingly content to respect the invisible boundary between them. Thank you, he said, surprising her with his sincerity. Don't make me regret it, she replied, moving to sit in a chair opposite the bed, maintaining a clear line of sight to both Max and the door. So, Max said, rubbing his ankles, you mentioned your species has different anatomy. How exactly does reproduction work for your kind? The question caught Kayla off guard. That's rather personal, isn't it? Says the woman who just harvested my reproductive fluid, Max countered with a wry smile. She conceded the point with a tilt of her head. Fair enough, my species, the Lorani, reproduce through a process of genetic exchange that's more cerebral than physical. There's still physical intimacy, but the actual reproductive component happens through a neural connection. That sounds intense, Max commented. So no, physical release? Not in the way humans experience it, she confirmed. The pleasure is primarily mental, though there are physical sensations that accompany it. Max leaned forward, genuinely curious. So when you extracted my essence, that was completely foreign to you? The method, yes, Kayla admitted, though I've studied enough xenobiology to understand the basics of human reproduction. Theory and practice are very different things, Max said with a hint of humor. Was it what you expected? Kayla found herself flushing slightly, her purple skin darkening along her cheekbones. Not entirely. Human males are more responsive than I anticipated. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? He asked, his voice dropping to a lower register that sent an unexpected shiver through her. I haven't decided yet, she replied honestly. Max stood slowly and Kayla tensed again, but he merely walked to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. You know, in human culture, intimacy usually involves mutual consent and pleasure. What happened earlier was one-sided. Are you complaining about the pleasure part? She asked, a teasing note entering her voice despite her attempt to remain professional. He turned to face her, his expression serious. I'm saying that trust goes both ways. You've shown a measure of trust by releasing me. Now it's my turn to show you that humans value reciprocity. Max took a step toward her, and this time Kayla didn't tense. Something in his demeanor had shifted. He wasn't approaching her as a captive seeking escape, but as a man interested in the woman before him. What are you suggesting? She asked, though she suspected she already knew. I'm suggesting that if you need another sample, There are more mutually enjoyable ways to obtain it, he said, stopping just short of her chair. Ways that don't involve restraints or sedatives. Kayla stood, bringing them face to face. And why would you offer that? Because despite the unusual circumstances of our meeting, I find you fascinating, Max admitted. And I think you feel the same way about me. His directness was refreshing. Among her own kind, such matters would be approached with layers of subtle cues and implied meanings. The human's straightforward approach was both disarming and appealing. You're not wrong, she conceded, taking a step closer. But this complicates things. Life is complicated, Max replied, reaching out to brush a strand of silver-white hair from her face, especially when it involves purple aliens stealing your essence. Kayla laughed, the tension between them transforming into something warmer. You're taking this remarkably well. Like I said, adaptation is a human specialty. His fingers lingered near her face, not quite touching her skin. May I? She nodded, and his hand cupped her cheek gently. The warmth of his palm against her skin sent a cascade of sensations through her body, different from the neural connections of her species, but no less intense. Your skin is cooler than a human's, Max observed, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. And yours is like touching a small sun, she replied, placing her own hand over his. What followed was a dance of discovery, tentative at first, then growing bolder as they explored the differences and similarities between their species. Kayla found herself fascinated by the heat that radiated from Max's body, the texture of his skin, the way his pulse quickened at her touch. For Max, the experience was equally novel. Kayla's cooler temperature and the subtle luminescence of her purple skin in the dim light of her quarters created an almost otherworldly experience. Their first kiss was an experiment, a testing of boundaries and compatibility. Their second was a confirmation that despite their physiological differences, some things transcended species. As clothing was gradually discarded, Kayla marveled at the strangeness and beauty of human anatomy, so different from her own people, yet perfectly suited to its purpose. Max in turn approached her body with a reverence that made her feel both powerful and vulnerable. Are you sure about this? She asked as they paused at the threshold of intimacy. Max's eyes met hers, clear and certain. Completely. Are you? Yes, Kayla replied, surprising herself with how true it felt. Though I should warn you, I've never been with a human before. He smiled, his hands tracing patterns on her skin that left trails of warmth in their wake. Then we'll learn together. What followed was a revelation for them both, a joining that transcended the physical to create something neither had expected when the evening began. Kayla woke to the unfamiliar sensation of warmth pressed against her back. For a moment she tensed, her mercenary instincts kicking in before memory returned. Max, their night together, the unexpected connection that had formed between them. She turned carefully to find him still asleep, his features relaxed in a way they hadn't been since she'd first lured him to her quarters. Humans looked so vulnerable when they slept, she thought. It was difficult to reconcile this peaceful figure with a species' reputation for tenacity and adaptability that had earned them a rapidly expanding place in the galactic community. Her contemplation was interrupted by an urgent chime from her communication console. Slipping from the bed, Kayla padded across the room, wrapping herself in a silken robe as she went. The message was from Elric, marked high priority. She glanced back at Max before activating it, ensuring he was still asleep. Elric's thin green face appeared on the screen, his expression tense. Ms. Tanari, I require immediate delivery of the sample. Circumstances have changed. Meet my associate at Docking Bay 17 within the hour. Full payment will be transferred upon receipt. The message ended abruptly, leaving Kayla frowning at the screen. The urgency was unusual, as was the change in delivery location. Something felt off. Bad news? Max's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him sitting up in bed, the sheet pulled around his waist. My client wants the sample delivered immediately. And that's a problem because, he prompted, clearly sensing her hesitation. Kayla sighed, moving back to sit on the edge of the bed. Because I'm not sure I want to deliver it anymore. Max raised an eyebrow. That doesn't sound like the professional mercenary I met yesterday. Yesterday I hadn't. She paused, struggling to articulate the shift in her perspective. Things have changed. Because of this? Max gestured between them. Partly, she admitted, but also because something about this contract has felt off from the beginning. Why is human reproductive material so valuable? What is Elric planning to do with it? Max's expression grew serious. Those are good questions. In my experience, when someone wants something this badly and won't explain why, the reason is rarely benign. Before Kayla could respond, another chime sounded, this one from Max's communication device, which had been set aside with his clothing. That's probably my commanding officer, he said grimly. I was supposed to report in hours ago. Kayla retrieved the device, handing it to him. What will you tell them? Max checked the message, his face confirming her guess. Commander Briggs wants to know why I missed this morning's security briefing and diplomatic breakfast. He looked up at her. I need to respond, or they'll start a station-wide search. Tell them you're engaged in cultural exchange, Kayla suggested, a hint of mischief in her voice despite the tension. Max snorted. Not entirely a lie. He composed a quick message, explaining that he'd met a cultural consultant who was providing valuable insights into local customs and would rejoin the delegation later. Will they believe that? Kayla asked as he sent the message. Probably not entirely, but it buys us some time. Max set the device aside. Now, about your client. Another chime from Kayla's console interrupted him. This time it was a station security alert. Attention all residents and visitors, the automated message announced. Security protocols have been elevated due to reported suspicious activity. All diplomatic personnel are advised to check in with their respective embassies. Increased security presence will be noticeable throughout the station. Max and Kayla exchanged concerned looks. That's not a coincidence, she said. Someone's looking for you. Or for the sample, Max suggested. Either way, we need to figure out what's going on. Kayla nodded, her mind racing through options. I have contacts on the station who might know something, but first we need to secure that sample. She retrieved the vial from its storage compartment and held it up, studying the pearlescent fluid inside. To think, all this trouble over something your body produces naturally. I'm flattered my bodily fluids are causing an interstellar incident, Max remarked dryly, standing to retrieve his clothes. Though I'd prefer not to be reduced to a walking genetic resource. As they dressed, Kayla outlined her plan. I'll contact Elric, tell him there's been a delay due to increased security. That should buy us time to investigate. Meanwhile, you should make a brief appearance with your delegation to avoid raising further suspicion. And then what? Max asked, fastening his uniform. I'm not letting you face this alone. The protective sentiment surprised her. In her line of work, people rarely concern themselves with her safety. This is my problem, Max. My contract, my responsibility. Not anymore, he said firmly. Whatever Elric wants with human genetic material affects my species. That makes it my concern. Kayla recognized the determination in his stance, the same steadfastness that had allowed him to maintain his dignity even while restrained. It was a quality she was coming to admire. Fine, she conceded. We'll meet back here in 3 hours. I'll see what my contacts know about Elric and his research. Max nodded, then hesitated. About last night. What about it? She asked, suddenly uncertain. Among her people, such encounters weren't typically discussed afterward. They simply were or weren't, with no need for verbal analysis. It was, he seemed to search for the right word, unexpected, but not unwelcome. Kayla felt a warmth that had nothing to do with our physical proximity. Humans and their need to verbalize everything, she teased, but her smile was genuine. Max stepped closer, his hand reaching up to trace the curve of her cheek. Another cultural difference for us to explore. Their kiss was brief but held a promise of more to come, assuming they survived whatever complications Elric's urgent demand might bring. As Max prepared to leave, Kayla handed him a small communication device. This is untraceable. Use it if you run into trouble. I thought mercenaries worked alone, he commented, pocketing the device. We do, she replied. Consider this an exception to my usual protocol. Once Max had departed, Kayla changed into her work attire. Practical, nondescript clothing that wouldn't draw attention, but allowed for freedom of movement and concealed weapons. The vial of prime essence she secured in a hidden compartment in her boot. As she prepared to contact her informant, Kayla caught herself touching her lips, still feeling the warmth of Max's kiss. The treasure she'd been hired to collect had led her to something far more valuable than she'd anticipated and potentially more dangerous. With a shake of her head, she refocused on the task at hand. Sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. Not when both their lives might depend on discovering the truth behind Elric's urgent demand. Kayla slipped through the shadowy underbelly of Nexus Station, navigating service corridors and maintenance shafts with practiced ease. Her contact, a Trelaxan information broker named Dorn, had agreed to meet in a rarely used storage bay, the kind of place where unofficial business thrived away from the station security's watchful eyes. Dorn was already waiting when she arrived, his translucent skin pulsing with nervous energy. "This better be worth my time, Tanari," he gurgled through his breathing apparatus. "Meeting you is risky business these days." "Risky?" Kayla raised an eyebrow. "Since when am I considered high risk?" "Since you started asking questions about Patron Elric," Dorn replied, glancing around nervously. "He's connected to some serious players, the kind that make problems disappear permanently." "I need to know what he wants with human reproductive material," Kayla pressed. "What's he planning to do with it?" Dorn's skin rippled with what passed for a sigh among his species. "He's part of a research collective called Genesis Initiative. They specialize in biological agents, specifically targeted genetic weapons." Kayla felt her blood chill. "Targeted at humans?" "Got it in one," Dorn confirmed. "Word is they're developing a compound that could render human males sterile, a preemptive measure against humanity's expansion, they're calling it." "Preemptive?" Kayla scoffed. "Humans have only been part of the galactic community for a few decades. That's exactly what has certain factions worried," Dorn explained. "They've advanced faster than any species we've encountered. Some believe they need to be contained before they become a threat." Kayla's hand instinctively moved to her boot where the vial was hidden. "And my sample is part of this containment plan?" "They need human genetic material to perfect the targeting mechanism," Dorn confirmed. "And you're not the only one collecting. There are at least 3 other mercenaries with similar contracts on this station alone." The implications hit Kayla like a physical blow. This wasn't just about Max anymore. It was about an entire species. "One more thing," Dorn added, his voice dropping even lower. "Station security is investigating reports of missing human males. Your diplomatic friend isn't the only target." Kayla thanked Dorn with a credit transfer larger than their usual arrangement and hurried back toward the diplomatic sector, her mind racing. She needed to warn Max, but her communication device remained silent. He hadn't reached out yet. Meanwhile, Max was discovering similar disturbing information. After making a brief appearance at the diplomatic briefing to allay suspicions, he had pulled aside his fellow security officer, Lieutenant Chadwick. "Has anyone else from the delegation reported unusual encounters?" Max asked carefully. Chadwick looked around before responding. "You too, huh?" Johnson and Patrick both mentioned being approached by exotic-looking females yesterday. Johnson actually went missing for a few hours, came back looking dazed and claiming he'd been sampling local hospitality. "Did he see a medical officer afterward?" Max pressed. "No. Why would he?" Chadwick frowned. "Wait, you think there's something coordinated happening?" "I'm not sure yet," Max replied truthfully. "But keep an eye out and tell the others to be cautious about private invitations." As Max left the diplomatic quarters, his communication device buzzed. Kayla's message was brief. "Meet me at Docking Bay 23, emergency. Don't trust station channels." The urgency in her tone was clear even through text. Max changed direction, moving quickly but casually to avoid drawing attention. Docking Bay 23 was a small private bay used primarily for diplomatic shuttles. When Max arrived, Kayla was already there, pacing nervously beside a sleek transport vessel. "We need to leave," she said without preamble. "Elric is part of a group developing a biological weapon targeting human males. They're using the essence samples to perfect it." Max's expression hardened. "That explains the other disappearances. Chadwick just told me 2 other officers reported being approached by alien females." "It's a coordinated effort," Kayla confirmed. "Dorn said there are at least 3 other mercenaries with contracts like mine." "So what's the plan?" Max asked, eyeing the transport. I can't just abandon my delegation. We need to get this information and the sample to human authorities, Kayla explained, but not through official channels. Elric has connections throughout the station. If we transmit this information, they'll intercept it. Max considered their options. The delegation has a secure communication array on our ship. We could use that to contact Earth directly. Can you access it without raising alarms? I'm head of security, Max reminded her with a slight smile. I have override codes. Their planning was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Kayla pulled Max behind a stack of cargo containers just as two Viridian security officers entered the bay. Elric's people, she whispered. They must be checking all potential exit points. They remained hidden until the Viridians completed their sweep and departed. Once alone again, Kayla turned to Max, her expression serious. There's something I need to tell you, she said quietly. I still have the sample. Max nodded. I figured as much. Planning to destroy it? It's evidence, she replied, but more importantly, it's yours. I had no right to take it in the first place. The admission clearly cost her professional pride, but Max appreciated her honesty. Under the circumstances, I'm glad you did. Otherwise, we might never have discovered this plot. Kayla smiled wryly. Finding the silver lining in being abducted and having your reproductive fluid stolen? You humans are remarkably forgiving. Not forgiving, Max corrected, taking her hand. Practical. What happened between us afterward was worth the unusual introduction. The tenderness in his voice made Kayla's pulse quicken. Even amid crisis, the connection between them remained palpable. We should focus on the mission, she said, though she didn't pull her hand away. Agreed, Max replied. But when this is over, we have unfinished business to discuss. The promise in his eyes sent a pleasant shiver through her. Humans and their persistent need to discuss everything, she teased. Not just discuss, Max countered with a grin that made her purple skin flush darker. Their moment was interrupted by Kayla's communication device. The message displayed made her expression darken. Elric knows I haven't delivered the sample. He's sending people to my quarters. She looked up at Max. We need to move now. Can you get us to your delegation's ship? Max nodded. There's a service corridor that connects to their docking bay. Security will be minimal if we time it right. Then let's go, Kayla said, checking her concealed weapon. We have a species to save and a conspiracy to expose. As they moved toward the exit, Max caught her arm. For what it's worth, I'm glad the treasure between my legs led you to me. Despite the gravity of their situation, Kayla couldn't help but laugh. Humans and their inappropriate timing for humor. Another charming quality you'll have to get used to, Max replied with a wink. Together, they slipped out of the bay, united by purpose and the unexpected bond that had formed between Mercenary and Mark. A bond that might just save humanity from an invisible threat. The service corridor leading to the human delegation's docking bay was dimly lit and narrow, forcing Kayla and Max to move in single file. Max led the way, his security training evident in every cautious movement and alert glance. Almost there, he whispered over his shoulder. The access hatch to our ship's docking area should be just ahead. As they approached the final junction, the corridor suddenly flooded with light. Standing before them was Patron Elric, flanked by 4 armed Viridian guards. Ms. Tenari. Elric's thin lips curved into what passed for a smile among his kind. I'm disappointed. We had a contract. Kayla stepped forward, positioning herself slightly in front of Max. The contract became void when I discovered your true intentions, Elric. Business is business, the Viridian replied with a dismissive wave. The Genesis Initiative paid handsomely for those samples. Nothing personal against humans, merely a preventative measure. Preventative? Max scoffed. You're developing a sterilization agent targeting my entire species. Elric's pale green skin flushed a darker shade. Your kind advances too quickly, spreads too far. The established order of the galaxy must be preserved. By committing genocide? Kayla challenged. Not genocide, Elric corrected. Population control. Humans would still exist, just in more manageable numbers. Kayla felt Max tense beside her, ready to fight despite the overwhelming odds. She placed a restraining hand on his arm. The sample, Ms. Tenari. Elric extended his hand. Hand it over, and perhaps we can negotiate your continued existence. Kayla reached slowly into her boot, retrieving the vial of pearlescent fluid. She held it up, the station lights making it glow almost ethereally. "You mean this?" she asked, her voice deceptively calm. "The treasure I was hired to steal?" Elric's eyes fixed greedily on the vial. "Precisely, our final component." "Interesting thing about treasures," Kayla continued, taking a step forward. "Sometimes their true value isn't what you initially think." In one fluid motion, she tossed the vial high into the air. Elric and his guards instinctively looked up, tracking its arc. The momentary distraction Kayla needed. She drew her concealed weapon and fired 3 rapid shots, disabling 2 guards before they could react. Max moved with impressive speed, tackling the 3rd guard while Kayla engaged the 4th. The narrow corridor worked to their advantage, preventing Elric's forces from surrounding them. Elric lunged for the falling vial, catching it just before it shattered on the floor. His triumph was short-lived as Max's fist connected with his jaw, sending the Viridian stumbling backward. "That's for trying to sterilize my species," Max growled, following with another punch. "And that's for making me miss breakfast." The vial flew from Elric's grasp, rolling across the floor toward Kayla. She scooped it up while maintaining her hold on the subdued guard. "Max, the alarm!" she shouted as Elric reached for a panel on the wall. Max dove across the space, but was too late to prevent Elric from triggering the station-wide alert. Sirens blared through the corridor as emergency lights began to flash. "We need to move," Kayla urged, securing the vial back in her boot. "Station security will lock down all docking bays." They sprinted the remaining distance to the human ship's access hatch, Max quickly inputting his override codes. The hatch slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the sleek interior of the diplomatic vessel. "This way," Max directed, leading her toward the communications center. "We need to transmit what we know before they cut external communications." The ship's systems came online at Max's command, the secure communication array powering up with a low hum. Kayla watched in admiration as his fingers flew across the controls with practiced efficiency. "Recording all evidence now," he announced, speaking clearly for the ship's audio capture. "This is Security Chief Max Harris of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. I'm transmitting evidence of a biological weapon being developed by a group called the Genesis Initiative, targeting human reproductive capabilities." As Max detailed their discoveries, Kayla kept watch through the viewport. Station security forces were converging on the docking bay, led by more of Elric's Viridian associates. "They're coming," she warned. "How much longer?" "Transmission complete," Max confirmed, initiating a secondary protocol. "I've sent copies to Earth Central Command, the Galactic Council, and 3 independent news networks. The information is out. They can't contain it now." The ship shuddered as docking clamps engaged, preventing their departure. Security override warnings flashed across the control panels. "They've locked us down," Kayla observed. "We're trapped." Max's response was interrupted by the ship's communication system. "Attention, human vessel. This is Station Commander Relax. We've received your transmission and are dispatching independent security forces to secure the Genesis Initiative personnel. Please remain aboard until the situation is contained." Kayla and Max exchanged surprised glances. "It worked?" she asked incredulously. "Humanity might be new to the galactic stage," Max replied with a grin. "But we've made some powerful allies. The Galactic Council takes biological weapons development very seriously." Through the viewport, they watched as a new security team, bearing the insignia of the Galactic Council, surrounded Elric and his remaining guards. The Viridian's expression was one of stunned disbelief as he was led away in restraints. "So what happens now?" Kayla asked, the adrenaline of their escape beginning to fade. Max turned to her, his expression softening. "That depends. What does a mercenary do when she's blown her cover and made enemies of a powerful research collective?" "Normally, disappear to the outer rim and change my identity," she admitted, "but I'm open to alternatives. Earth's Xenobiology Division could use someone with your unique perspective on interspecies relations," Max suggested, moving closer. "And I happen to know the head of security for the Diplomatic Corps." Kayla raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a job, Security Chief Harris?" "Among other things," he replied, his hand finding hers. "It turns out the treasure I found wasn't just between my legs after all." She laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Humans and their sentimental metaphors? You'll get used to it, Max promised, pulling her into his arms. Their kiss was interrupted by the ship's communication system once more. Security Chief Harris, please report to Station Command with your consultant. Debriefing in 30 minutes. Max sighed against her lips. Duty calls? I'm beginning to understand why humans are considered so dangerous, Kayla observed as they prepared to disembark. You're relentlessly dedicated to your causes and to the people we care about, Max added meaningfully. 3 months later, Kayla stood before a window in her new quarters on Earth, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded her of home. The door slid open behind her as Max entered, still in his formal diplomatic uniform. How was the Galactic Council hearing? She asked, turning to greet him. The Genesis Initiative has been officially disbanded, he reported, loosening his collar. Elric and his associates are facing charges for weapons development and conspiracy. Your testimony was crucial to the case. My first legitimate job, she mused. It feels strange to be on the right side of galactic law. Strange but good, Max asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Kayla leaned back against his chest, enjoying the now familiar warmth of his body. Surprisingly so, and though I miss the excitement sometimes. Which is why I brought you this, Max said, producing a datapad. A new assignment from Xenobiology? They need someone to investigate rumors of another fringe group collecting alien biological materials. She took the pad, scanning the details with professional interest. Using my criminal past for the forces of good? How very human of you. We're adaptable that way, he replied with a smile. Besides, who better to catch essence thieves than a reformed one? Kayla turned in his arms, her blue eyes meeting his. You know, I never did properly thank you for changing my career path. No. Max's voice dropped to that lower register that still sent shivers through her. I can think of a few ways you might express your gratitude. As the sun set over Earth, Kayla reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her here, from mercenary to consultant, from captor to partner. The treasure she'd been sent to collect had indeed been valuable, but not in the way anyone had anticipated. It had led her to something far more precious, a new purpose, a new home, and a love that transcended the boundaries of species and stars. In the end, the real treasure wasn't what lay between a human male's legs. It was what lay within his heart.